By the time the invasion of Iraq occurred, this was 2003, and I was stationed out in San Diego. And I can say that looking at the operation from afar, basically, I felt reluctant about it. I felt the idea of invading a country didn't exactly align with my vision of service. But my concerns about that were not strong enough to get me to resign in protest or, to do anything resistant. But it was on my mind. And I'm not sure how I would have reacted if I had had the opportunity to participate in that invasion. But that's not when my opportunity came. My opportunity came in the fall of 2003. So just a historical recap here. Iraq is invaded in 2003. U.S. forces move into the country. Baghdad falls by the spring. President Bush declares mission accomplished. Most military forces go home. The Army leaves a contingent behind for, reconstruction and so forth. Pretty much the entire Marine Corps is back in the United States at this point, and I am still in San Diego. It's at this point that I have the decision to make, because that's when my tour of duty ends there, and I have the choice between getting out of the military or taking orders. And I know that if I take orders, that's going to be to an infantry outfit, an infantry battalion. And I know that infantry battalion is going to deploy to Iraq. I know this, or Afghanistan. So it's a very tangible choice at this point. So there was something to consider here. I could have gotten out. I mean, there are people who find themselves in situations where they've joined the military and then a war begins and they don't have that choice. They get, sent. They get, deployed, and they didn't have a choice. But in my case, I really did. And so this is one of the reasons that I pay particular attention to my sense of responsibility about this participation, because of this fact, because of this choice that I had to make. What weighed on my decision? Well, I think that one of the main things that weighed on my decision was a long-standing, desire and a hunger for the combat experience. You spend a decade in a combat organization, training and talking about how you're going to distinguish yourself, promising people back home how you're going to be a hero, and so forth, moving amidst people who have been in combat, who have stories, who have medals. And at that point in time in my career, I hadn't participated in any kind of combat operation, even though I had been in. And this was just a happenstance thing. And nevertheless, your cultural and professional credibility start to get called into question the longer you're in without having had that experience. Now, getting out certainly would have solved that problem. I wouldn't have had anybody to answer to on that point. But then again, there were all the people back home. The people who I had told how I was trained for the fight, and if only they'd give me the shot, that I would distinguish myself. And then they offered me Iraq on a silver platter. Now, I don't know if that in and of itself would have been enough to get me to go to Iraq, but then there was what happened in Iraq that pushed me a little bit closer to making the decision to stay in. And what that was a growing insurgency. Over the summer of 2003, the Army started to take attacks by people in Iraq. They weren't referred to as insurgents at the time, but there was definitely a growing resistance to American forces. And so in the fall, the president had ordered forces back to Iraq to, contain this insurrection or insurgency. So suddenly the operation changed from invasion to occupation, but it wasn't called occupation, of course. We weren't really thinking about it. We as in the military, what we were thinking about was reconstruction and stability operations. That's how we referred to it as. And these are words that were okay with me. When I talked about my vision of service, the idea of going and helping people to rebuild their country, to stabilize things, those things sounded good. And the fact that I would be in a situation where I might get into a fight, some kind of combat situation, was convenient. And so I accepted orders to go to Iraq. Well, I accepted orders to an infantry battalion that I was fairly confident would be going to Iraq.